Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast.
Hey, don't let these tears fool you. It's all dog around this mug. I'm good.
Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. On this edition, we talk to Saints reporter Ross Jackson. Ross Jackson is well known among Saints fans all over from his podcast, Locked On Saints, and also his hard work and dedication covering our favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. I talk with him about several topics that the Who Dat Nation wants to talk about. I do want to apologize in advance. We had some technical issues at the radio station, which caused a little bit of the interview to be cut off. So I do apologize for that. But we did talk about a few topics. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up with Ross talking a little bit about the Saints selecting quarterback Spencer Rattler.
Pick, if you will, like hand pick. You know what I mean? We see this in the NFL all the time. Cliff Kingsbury going in and taking over in Arizona. He didn't want Josh Rosen. He wanted Kyler Murray. So he drafts Kyler Murray, and then he trades, Josh Rosen for those magical beans you talked about. And so I think that that ends up being a big part of why I think Spencer Rattler has sort of this in track, is because he feels like he's like this staff's selection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at him, and I've always been high on Spencer Rattler. I've always thought that he had the talent, all the tools to be a really good quarterback. And I can understand Saints fans' excitement about him. I mean, if he can put it all together, I mean, he has just as much talent as any other quarterback that has been drafted, and it came into the league. I mean, he can be like one of those stories that you hear, like Brock Purdy or one of these other late round quarterbacks. I mean, he has that type of talent. But you got to wonder about Jake Haener. I mean, Jake Haener was the 4th round pick last season for the New Orleans Saints. And, when you look at Jake Haener, I mean, a lot of positive things, especially like during the training camp process, how he absorbed the offense, how he was absorbing it like a sponge. Do you expect for him to take a little bit of a jump from year 1 to year 2?
I would expect that he'll challenge for that, that he'll put up a fight for that second quarterback role. I mean, look, Derek Carr has been his mentor forever, as long as he was over at Fresno State and everything like that. So there's like that little bit of a connection. And so his ability to be able to fit into the system makes sense, being able to kind of speak the same language as the guy that's running the system right now and everything. But look, and I know this could be really dismissive, and I don't mean for it to be, but it's just simply that like outliers don't work in the NFL. That's why they're outliers. You know what I mean? And him being a sub 6 foot quarterback, it's just tough, man. Like we don't know if Bryce Young's going to pan out. We've seen guys like Kyler Murray pan out. Drew Brees, I think you can make the argument that he was 6 foot, 6 foot flat. You know what I mean? And so however you feel about that. But I mean, in any case, like he ends up being a guy that just kind of falls into that outlier category. And so it's going to be really tough for him. I think that the odds are just kind of stacked there. So I think that if he takes that and says, you know what, I'm gonna fight because of that, then I think that maybe there's something there, right? And we'll see how he's able to combat sort of what those expectations are and all these other things. But otherwise, I do think that it's going to be a little bit more challenging. I think that his hill to climb is a little bit steeper than Rattler's is, as coming into his second year. But I would not be surprised to see him take a step forward in terms of his playing ability, because he did show some really nice things, even in the late preseason. Struggled a little bit early, I know, but late preseason, what was that, the Chargers game, if I remember correctly? Right. Looked really good towards the end. And then training camp, like he stood out to us quite a bit throughout training camp. But, who are you throwing against? All these other things are going to be those question marks. But so I think it's going to be tougher. But yeah, I would expect him to take a step forward. I just don't know if that step forward is going to be enough to hold on much longer if Spencer Rattler is able to challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jake Hayner, and one thing that was eye-popping to me was his stat line in college. I mean, he completed 70% of his passes in the final year. The touchdown to interception ratio is exactly where you want it to be. And I'm one of those individuals that feel like if a quarterback has a high completion percentage in college, I mean that's a positive trait to have going into the pros. And if
Agreed.
you can develop into a quarterback, I mean, you may not be a starter, Ross, but I mean, a lot of backup quarterbacks have made a lot of money holding that clipboard throughout.
Hello, Chase Daniel.
Exactly.
No, you're absolutely right. I just think that like the thing that makes it so challenging is like from the moment that Jake Hayner was drafted, I was like, he's going to be a very good backup quarterback in the NFL. You could just see it with the way that he understands the game, the way that he talks about the game, the way that he sees the game, all that. And he was going to be a perfect backup to Derek Carr because they speak the same language. I think though that what you're looking at for Hayner is at this time, until we see more, the ceiling feels like backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Spencer Rattler's ceiling feels higher and his floor feels like a backup quarterback. You know what I mean? I think that like it's not going to be I'm afraid that the future of Jake Hayner with the New Orleans Saints won't be determined by Jake Hayner. It'll be determined by Spencer Rattler. And this is where like the NFL rules and the way that they've changed things where now your emergency third quarterback doesn't have to be in your active roster anymore. They can come from your practice squad. It just makes the team building, the roster building portion of it stack up even more against Hayner, which just creates the challenge. Doesn't mean that he can't overcome those challenges. It just creates a new challenge than what he was ready to experience as a rookie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough, especially like since Spencer Rattler is the new shiny toy, right? I call it the Buzz Lightyear complex. You know how Woody was
yes, he was the guy.
favorite toy throughout the years, and then all of a sudden Buzz Lightyear comes in with his wingspan and all his flashing lights. But I think that there's still a spot for Jake Hayner. Like even if it doesn't pan out in New Orleans. I mean, I just think that he's an intelligent quarterback, and teams are looking for that, regardless.
Philadelphia will love him.
Exactly. I mean, then there's several other teams, that will love him. And, if he take advantage of those opportunities, he could see the field like we talked about. I mean, there's a lot of backup quarterbacks that have made a lot of money throughout the years, just holding that clipboard. So let's talk about the starting quarterback, Derek Carr, right? I mean, a lot of, ups, some downs last season. There were some injuries that, that caused him to play the way that he did. A lot of people feel he's going into a new year with the New Orleans Saints, but also a new offense under offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. What are your thoughts on Derek Carr? Do you think that he can absorb that offense to get the Saints back on track offensively to be that efficient offense that we have grown to love, Ross?
I think that he can absorb the offense. Whether or not the offense turns out to be more efficient and everything like that, that's going to be something that they're just going to have to prove on the field. But I think that he can get them to that point. My question is, how long will it take? That's the thing for me. Like you look at last year, it didn't take 4 games for him to adjust to the new system and for the New Orleans Saints to adjust to their new offense. I mean, I know it was the same offensive coordinator in Pete Carmichael last year, but there were still changes in that offense, everything except for runs on second down after incomplete passes. That stayed the same. But I think when you look at the fact that it took them really 12 games to kind of figure it out, that's a little bit concerning when you're bringing in an entirely new system here. And historically, Derek Carr has struggled his first year with a new offensive coordinator and then has gotten better. I think the one exception was John Gruden. And then he's gotten better after struggling that first year. But then the offensive coordinator wasn't around long enough for him to really be able to, turn in anything bottom, top, never a top 20 defense, all these other things that I'm sure like Derek Carr fans will bring to your attention constantly, everything, which aren't invalid. I don't mean to say that in a way that invalidates those. Like those were a part of his experience with the Raiders. Here in New Orleans, I think the biggest thing is just going to be, can he, for the first time in his career, which doesn't mean that it can't happen. It would be the first time that it happens. Can he come in with a new offensive coordinator and immediately, or as immediately as possible, more expeditiously pick up the new offense? What I think will help them is the fact that they're doing training camp out in California while they're doing all the remodels here in New Orleans.
Right.
And so they're going to be around each other. They're going to be hanging around each other. They're going to be practicing with one another. They're going to be working out with one another. They're going to be eating dinner together with one another, all that. And so I think all that goes a long way in terms of being able to come together and understand what your new offense is and what it's going to be. So I think that that's kind of the benefit to all that maybe helps it all happen. But I think that's got to be the first thing that happens first. I believe that Derek Carr can run this offense. I think that's why they went and got Clint Kubiak, why he seemed like he was the candidate and the number one guy all along, which, of course they're going to tell you that, but it really even felt like that if
Yeah.
you really watched the way that they kind of conducted themselves throughout that search.
Right.
And so if that is truly the case, then I think that if they handpick the right system for him and the play calling gets better, which it should with Clint Kubiak, then I think that at least gives them what they need to be able to be that better offense to improve. This is still a ninth scoring offense, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
doing it when it matters, being able to show up when it matters, fourth quarter, within 2 minutes and down, like those types of things. I think that that's where you want to see this team really take a step up, and then earlier rather than, week 12, like what happened last year, or after 12 weeks, like what happened last year.
Yeah, you got to hit the ground running. I mean, based on the feelings and the emotions of the Who Dat Nation, like it seemed like they're going into week one ready to boo. Like you got to hit the ground. I will give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm one of those individuals that feels like if you're going to criticize the coaching staff or say something about the coaching staff, or maybe they need to go in a different direction, you might want to look at the development and how those players and how they're being affected by some of the things that we're seeing. So maybe it could be one of those issues where the Saints had to turn the page. They move on from P. Carmichael. They bring in Clint Kubiak. Do you think that maybe a more of an emphasis, which we're anticipating, an emphasis on a running game will help Derek Carr? Like, because I mean, you have Alvin Kamara, you have Jamal Williams, you have Kendre Miller. You have to like what you saw in the last game versus the Falcons from Kendre.
Yeah.
So do you think that might be beneficial to Derek?
Yeah, I think that ends up being a big emphasis in this wide zone offense. Like they want to be able to do that. They want to get their running backs out into space, all those other things. And so I think that as long as they're running the ball and they're finding a way to do it without running Alvin Kamara 40 times in between the tackles, then I think that, yes, you'll see like the benefit there. And the way that benefits is, it makes it creates loaded boxes. It makes the second level on opposing defense a little bit more aggressive. You can use things like play action and rollouts and all these other things, which when they started incorporating a little bit, it wasn't that they incorporated more of it towards the end of the season. It's that they found out when to sequence it so that it made sense based upon what their previous play calls were and then how it was more impactful.
Right.
Then I think that that's where you start to see the benefit there. I spoke with somebody within the Saints organization that told me that the upside to this new offense is partly measured by the fact that kind of, in the last couple of years, the offense didn't feel like it really fit their team, didn't feel like it fit their personnel. My understanding is that there are people that now believe that the offensive scheme now better fits the personnel. And I think that's a part of it, is that you don't have to play hero ball in an offense that can run the football. That's one of the reasons why the run game is important. Now, you got to be able to throw to put points on the board, right? You got to throw to score points. You run the ball to win the game.
Right.
And so you got to be able to run the ball to win the game. And that's going to be the big emphasis for this team, is running towards the outside, being able to use some of those stretch plays, those outside zone plays, and then the whole litany of play action looks or play fakes that come off of that, the jet sweeps, the motion, all this other stuff that you can now incorporate into this offense that wasn't being incorporated before for whatever reason. Then I think that all of those things help make an offense more quarterback friendly. And I think that that's the part that really benefits Derek Carr if everything gets it, if everybody kind of gets it right off the bat. And I think that's one of the reasons why I mentioned, like, look, I do think that Derek Carr can run this offense, but will it be efficient will be up to the rest of the offense as well. Can everybody pick it up? Can they build the run game? Can they do all these things? Can they block? Like, all of those things will be the ones that end up having a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Which segues me to my final question for you, which is the offensive line. You mentioned a little bit about Ryan Ramczyk and his future being uncertain. The Saints drafting Fuaga in the first round out of Oregon State. It seems like the Saints are trying to solidify that offensive line. Not really going back to some of those old familiars like Andres P. Instead, bringing in Justin Herron, and you also have Shane Lemieux that came in. So the offensive line, what the Saints have been doing this offseason, like what are your thoughts on the offensive line? There's still a question mark when it comes to the left tackle, but at least they're trying to address this. What are your thoughts on the offensive line this offseason?
I think that they're preparing for themselves to see their best case scenario work out first.
Mm.
And then they're going to have to figure stuff out if the best case scenario doesn't work. And so best case scenario, the way that I look at it is, hey, look, you invested a lot of draft capital to get Trevor Penning to New Orleans. Your best case scenario is Trevor Penning is your starting left tackle, and then the guy that you just drafted in Taliesin Fuanga is your starting right tackle.
Right.
And so that's your best case scenario on your bookends. My biggest question is, who the heck plays left guard, right? Who is that going to be? Now, it could be Nick Saldiveri, who they traded up to the very, very beginning of day 3 last year in last year's draft to select and all that coming out of ODU. I saw him out at one of the girls' high school flag football games. Looked good, no brace, no limp, nothing like that. So it's good to see with all that, with the injury that he had that effectively shut him down last season. And so I think that is an option there. But look, I mean, you mentioned some of the other guys, like Shane Lemieux has played in wide zone offenses most of his career. He was asked to do a version of it with the New York Giants when he was there. Mark Evans coming out of, isn't he Pine Bluff? Yeah, UAPB. Could be, going into his second season there. Landon Young could move inside. Like, there's a lot of different ways they could do that. But I think, like, left tackle, right tackle, the best case scenario option is available. What you do if Trevor Penning doesn't pan out at left tackle, that's going to be something that, like, that's just going to be tough. If that doesn't work out, then that's a bullet you got to bite, and then you got to figure that out. Yep. You're good at right guard and center.
Yep.
It's really just that left guard spot now that is the biggest question mark. And then the question mark becomes, what do you do at left tackle if Penning deals with an injury or it's just not coming together or whatever? And hopefully the new system benefits him there. But for me, that's the biggest thing. So I feel pretty good about the building blocks that the Saints have. I'm not going to say I feel good about their offensive line until we see it, but I feel good about the building blocks that they have. I just don't know what they're going to do at left guard just yet. And look, they could still go to free agency if they wanted to. Dalton Reisner's still out there. There's still some other players they could potentially pursue. But as of right now, I don't know that they have the answer there. And that's probably going to be a spot that I would look at for right now. That's under, it's a competition right now to see who starts there.
Yeah. I mean, do you see any chance that if it doesn't work out for Trevor Penning, would they slide him to that left guard position?
It's tough. You could do that, but if the footwork doesn't improve, then putting him in a small area, that's not going to be great for him, right? Mm-hmm. Like, your footwork's got to be good. You have to understand your leverage. You got to understand how to move because someone else is moving around you. You got to understand how to pull without getting into somebody else's, stance and all these other things like that. Those are the things that have always kind of have always made me feel like a little bit more cautious about the idea that, oh yeah, we'll just put him in at left guard because he's never played it before. He's never played on the interior before because he's big. And he's always been good at left tackle at the level that he played. And then the other part is that if your major concern with him is, hey, speed moves to the inside shoulder, that's not great on the interior. That's not great. And so, it sounds stupid, but it almost kind of reduces some of the concerns with him playing at a position that he is naturally set for and has played his entire career, than moving him inside and creating more problems for him, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like you got to find something to do.
With him. Yeah.
And you got to give him opportunities to show you what he has. Cause I mean, it was a first round pick, and I know teams aren't so quick to give up on those guys. They try to find places for them to actually, I guess, match their value or try to find some value in them. So let's just hope everything pans out with Trevor Penning. But Ross, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. Really do appreciate it. Before you get out of here, just let everybody know how they can get in touch with you and tell them a little bit about Locked On Saints.
You can find it. It's out there. I'm not worried about promoting me, man. I want to say thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be here to chop it up with you. I think you do a fantastic job, and the show just gets better and better and better, everything. And it's always great to be able to chop it up with you. So if you want to find me, come and check out this episode of State of the Saints podcast. If you want to find me otherwise, go find TJ. He'll tell you where I'm at. I ain't worried about it.
Well, I am going to say that you need to subscribe to Locked On Saints, and I appreciate Ross for being here. I mean, like I said, one of the hardest working individuals I know, man. And, I'm always rooting for you, man. You're such a amazing person. I say that behind the scenes, but I'm going to tell you to your face. All right. You're an amazing person.
That, man.
And I thank you for all of the content that you put out, man, and all the hard work that you put in. We really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure to be able to chop it up with you, spend some time with you. That kind of stuff means the world. And, I just can't wait to see what else we're doing next. So thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Hopefully we have some better things to talk about. I mean, it's been a while. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, Who Dat Nation, once again, Mr. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. Thank you, man.
Thank you, bro.